Hey everyone, so today I wanted to make a video going over the speedrun strategies for Sundered Doctrine fireteam. The Speedrun.com team is currently going to be hosting a speedrun tournament for this dungeon in the near future. So in order for newer runners to kind of get used to strategies ahead of time, I wanted to make a video going over the strategies that are used in the current world record, which is just under 9 minutes, recently submitted by this team here, featuring Baguette, Pingo, and of course, German. So I'm pretty excited to talk about the strategies here. I know chronologically we've skipped past duality. I've been really busy recently with getting ready for finals and my last semester of undergrad, but once that's over, I will be back on my regular schedule of making videos. I know you guys haven't heard from me in a while, but this is kind of a time-sensitive video, so I wanted to get it out as quickly as possible, so all of you who are planning on participating in the tournament or just interested in speedrunning this new dungeon relatively soon, you guys can have these strategies available to you as early as possible. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about team comp right off the bat. So first, at the start of this dungeon, we're going to have 2 Titan and 1 Hunter. Right? Now, a lot of dungeons that we've talked about in the past have 2 hunters or 3 hunters on entrance in order to speed it up, but really this dungeon you only need 1 person to get to first encounter to start it as early as possible, and then there's quite a long waiting period after you start first encounter, so having the other 2 players in your fire team get to first encounter a little slow is not really a big deal, and you only need 1 person on hunter to be able to make the skip to second encounter, which we're going to talk about as well once we get there. The Titans are very, very good at first encounter because of Peregrine Greaves being a refreshable one-shot option for the subjugators, which can otherwise be kind of slow to kill depending on what you use to kill them. And then on top of that, they're obviously very good for Zoetic Lockset damage as well. Now, on top of that, we have a 1 warlock swap toward the middle of the dungeon. So the hunter, once they complete the skip to Zoetic Lockset, they're going to switch to warlock, and the reason for that is you've probably seen this before, but Chaos Reach with Geomags is really good with limit break on Zoetic Lockset. You can hit like up to 3 shriekers at the same time, which is pretty crazy stuff. And then for the final encounter, having a well is pretty nice as well, and not having a hunter for transition is not the end of the world with the current iteration of the strategies. So you basically have 2 titans for mechanics plus damage, you have a hunter for a skip, and then that turns into a warlock for damage plus a well at the end of the dungeon for Kerrev. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and actually watch the run now. You're going to see here on entrance, let me just resync here. Also, I have this cool new like multi-view tech where all of these POVs are synced up, which is really, really cool. I hope you guys enjoy this. Again, both of the Titans are going to be top left and top right here, Titan number 1, Titan number 2. And we're going to have the Hunter in the bottom middle here, a little bit cropped. Now, as you can see, something interesting is that the Hunter actually cuts through the puzzle section for the Catalyst for Finality's Augur. That's some pretty cool routing there that some teams are using because the Hunter can be like a little bit faster than the Titans, who are kind of sword flying with line rampant and catapult lift here. You can see here that the Titans are kind of boosting themselves downward with mountaintop through that drop to get through a little bit faster, and the Hunter is already making his way to first encounter. He's just arrived there. He's going to go ahead and place a flag, and then he's going to rally on a loadout with a rocket and squall on prismatic in order to get ready for his skip. He's going to need that stuff for his skip, and his Titans are just getting into the encounter now. Okay, so now we're going to talk about first encounter. I'm not going to get into the POVs for a little bit because first encounter of Sundered Doctrine is arguably maybe even the hardest dungeon encounter that there is in terms of strategy and execution. There are a couple of them out there that are up there as well, like Cube and Prophecy, which we talked about before, but this one is definitely up there. This one is like raid encounter levels of complexity when it comes to strategy. So we're going to talk about just why that is. I'm going to assume this video, like 30 to 40 minutes of the video, will just be spent talking about first encounter. We're going to go over the specific RNG that they get in this run, talk about how they play around that RNG, and we're going to talk about some general strategies as well. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and tab out to Photoshop here, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at this little map that I've made of the first encounter of Sundered Doctrine. Now, to be clear, I didn't make the actual underlying map. This is by Kenshi here, who I assume has drawn this wonderful map for us. But the underlying kind of routing and stuff, I just made it kind of visually pleasing so you guys have a good understanding of what's actually going on. So the first thing I want to talk about is lens usage. So first you can see here that you have 4 rooms. This is the top wheel when you enter, and then like the stairs going down underneath it when the encounter ends, just to kind of situate you guys so you know what angle we're looking at the encounter from. And then you have 4 rooms with 4 wheels, right? 1 in each room. Now, the thing is here, right, if you see all of these kind of yellow, green, red, and blue lines that I've drawn, they ignore a lot of the lenses, the lens sockets, we can call them, in the encounter, because these are actually inefficient to use and you can kind of just safely ignore them. Okay, so speedrunners actually completely ignore all of these sockets that I've shown you just now. Okay, so the only ones that we really need to worry about are the efficient lenses, right? And those are going to be lenses that only require you to use, or paths, I should say, that only require you to use 2 lenses to reach a wheel. Now, those of you who are clever might have noticed that there is one wheel here that is asymmetrical, that is different from the others, and that is going to be R1. Bottom right is the bane of SD runners' existences, and that's because you are required to use a minimum of 3 lenses no matter what. Now, technically, you could go B3 and then go to 4 through here, but that is still going to be 3 lenses. You're still going to be eating up a room lens from top right. So that is why R1 is really, really bad RNG to have in an SD run. In fact, the people that currently have record, who I was talking to, Baguette's team, they run it back if they get a bottom right room in the first round or in the first half of second round. And, you know, it's not like a left lens that was consumed in the previous round. Like, for example, if you were to get R2 in the first round and then you were to get R1 something in the next round, that would be a rib. And the reason for that is because over time, gradually, the right side Titan, which we'll talk about in a second here, has time to fill up this D lens during their downtime between rounds. But if you get that early on, the amount of time you have to take to kill an additional subjugator to fill up C, D, and 4 in order to get R1 is just too much to handle. And the majority of your team is going to be on the left side of the encounter, so they can't even really help you fill up this D lens without losing a lot of time. Okay, so that's the reason why R1 is really bad as a starting condition. Now, in terms of other starting conditions, where are the players going at the very, very start of the encounter? It's a good question. So because we're practically ignoring R1 because of how bad its RNG is, one player goes to each of the remaining rooms, L1, L2, and R2. So the hunter actually starts by going to L1. So let's go ahead and look at the hunter role here. That's going to be our orange. So they go ahead and start the encounter by rotating the central lens, and then or the central light source, I should say. They go and they kill the subjugator. Now, the reason why the hunter goes to L1 in particular, why not L2 or R2? The subjugator spawn in L2 and R2 can be a little bit random. L1 is fairly consistent, this team told me. And so as you can see here, this guy, he just spawn camps the lens bearer. He izzies it in the head, which gets it to finisher instantly. And then he makes an Aeon finisher for his team, which they will use later on at the end of the encounter to refill their sword ammo so that they have full sword ammo for the transition, which then will result in having more salvations ammo for DSM. And then later on, when they get the Zoetic, they don't get a flag, which makes their heavy ammo burden a lot lesser. Okay, so this is just heavy ammo, and of course he gets a subjugator and the lens as well, which is important as well. Okay, so what are the Titans doing if the hunter is on Izzy and like a rocket and, you know, on skip related stuff? The Titans are going to be on a rocket sidearm. They're going to be on an eager edge sword, and they're also going to be on Peregrine Greaves. You guys are probably aware that Peregrine Greaves, if you one shot like a mini boss plus with your shoulder charge with you being airborne, it refunds the entire charge. And on top of that, it does a huge amount of additional damage. So the Titans, if we go ahead and watch their POVs here, let's go ahead and watch the top left POV. Nice little flashbang grenade there on the lens bearer, so make sure he doesn't move or kind of like strike you or suspend you or anything. And then boom, he's just going to one-shot him, right? Bang, just like that. He gets his entire shoulder charge back, and now he has a lens to use, right? So that's one of the reasons why Titans are so good in this encounter. So what do the Titans actually do if the hunter is going to L1? Well, one of the Titans is going to L2, one of the Titans is going to R2. But how do they know which room contains the wheel that they actually need to use? Are they looking for the Truth Speaker? Are they looking for the Grim? Or are they going to do something else? Well, for those of you who are not aware, the central wheel in Sundered Doctrine First Encounter can be read in a way to determine which room you actually need to go. Now in solo, this is really annoying because you actually still need to read the wheels of all these rooms in order to know where the symbol is that you're looking for. Now in Fireteam, neglecting R1, because if it's R1, you're going to run it back anyway, you have your 3 players read their wheels. You have L2 read the top left wheel, you have your hunter read the L1 wheel, and then you have the other Titan read the R2 wheel. And so the way this works is that at the very start of the encounter during the first round, you're going to have 2 symbols and 1 dark symbol that you need to fill up, right? It's not necessarily going to be in this order, but this might be how it looks, right? And that third symbol is going to form a phrase. And that phrase is either going to be a truth or a lie. And you guys are familiar with this if you've done the dungeon before. And I have made this kind of image here. Shout out to someone else who made like a simpler version in Paint. I just made a more aesthetically pleasing one of truths and lies. This is kind of like a little infographic here. Again, this will be available for you guys to take a look at. I'll also publish this map as well for any purposes that you guys might want to use it for. And again, so the nice thing about First Encounter is that the wheel in the center that has those 3 symbols is always going to be looking for truths. So So there are a vast number of lies that are possible in the Sundered Doctrine dungeon, but thankfully you can kind of disregard them for the first encounter. You only really need to memorize the truths, of which there are, what, 4, 6, 8, there's 11. That's not that many, right? And the nice thing about the way that these truths work is that if you have any given 2 symbols, you are guaranteed to know for certain what the third needs to be. And that's because for whatever reason, right, if you were to get, for example, Hive, Praise, and then it was either Dark or S, you, from what I've been told, in first encounter, these guys have run first encounter hundreds and hundreds of times. They have never gotten an ambiguous set of RNG, which basically means Hive, Prey, and then the remaining 2 rooms are Dark and S. So you're like, you don't know which one, you have to go kill the bat, right? They've always gotten pretty much a guaranteed answer. So it's either going to be like Hive, Prey, Dark, and something else, or it's going to be Hive, Prey, S, or something else. So what that basically means is that if you have a Titan who knows the possible truths, and they sit there in the middle and they read out Hive, Prey, whatever, and his teammates call like S or whatever, he knows it's Hive, Prey, S, right? He knows Hive, Prey's Worm. And so Worm is the room that needs to be filled up. Okay, so that's how reading works during the first round. So let me go ahead and erase this. And in fact, let's go ahead and look at how these players respond to the RNG of the first round, which I've written the RNG that they got in this run. It's going to be L1, L1, R2, and then R2, L1, L2. I'll explain what the ordering means in a second. So L1 simply means that the bottom left room is the one that contains the symbol that was on the wheel, or that was missing from the wheel, that needs to be filled up. So the way that this generally works, first round is a little bit different from the other 2 rounds. The hunter serves as a floater for the second and third rounds, but for the first round, he's like an in-room person, right? He's a bottom left room person. So what he does is he one-shots the subjugator. He hears the call out from his Titan teammate, who is currently here scouting before he goes to L2, and the call out is L1, or the call out is whatever symbol that the guy had in L1. So because this guy reads the symbol on his wheel and he knows it's L1, he kills the subjugator, and then we're going to go ahead and watch him. He's going to go ahead and put his lens inside of the socket that leads to his room. Okay, so fairly simple. It's going to be 1, and then obviously someone needs to fill up A, right? Someone needs to fill up A. Now, a big difference between this team strategy, and I've also reviewed the strategies of a couple other teams as well, a big difference between how good this team's first encounter is compared to the other teams that I've seen is that the other teams tend to really prioritize pre-placing as many lenses and duping as much as they can to have all the sockets filled up as often as they can. This team is much more adaptive. They react to the call, and they really try to focus on finishing the laser that needs to be, tended to at that time. So for example, right here, their general rule is that they're always going to prioritize duping on sockets A and C, so making sure these are occupied, because then you have full coverage of the entire map, no matter what the RNG is, right? Because A can cover both L2 and L1, right, regardless of which one comes first, and C can cover both R2 and R1, whereas if you were to try and do A, B, or BC, the other 2 possible combinations, then you might be missing L1 or R1, depending on how the RNG goes, right? So this team hard prioritizes filling up A and C every time, making sure they're always filled up, and on top of that, they try their best not to dupe on a socket that is involved in the current laser. So what do I mean by that? So the Titans that are going into L2 and R2 right now, they don't need to place in 2 and 3, because currently the one that needs to be filled up is 1 in order to access L1, because L1 is the RNG right now, right? So then you have 2 Titans with lenses. Where do you want them to put the lenses, and how can you possibly utilize duping? Well, the L2 Titan is going to come and place in A, which we'll see in a second, and the L2 Titan could in theory dupe on A. Now what do I mean by duping? I know I'm skipping around here a little bit. Duping, you can die as you finish the placement of a lens in a socket in this dungeon, and it will successfully place the lens in the socket, but also drop a lens on your body, so that when someone revives you, or you get revived, you can also pick up the lens, or they can pick up the lens off your body. So let me go ahead and show you exactly what that looks like here. So the top left Titan is going to go ahead and let me actually play these so they're in sync. Sorry about that. So you'll see here, the top right here, this is the top left Titan POV, I believe. And he is going to make his way to the middle, and he is just going to place right in this socket. This socket is going to be A. So if we go ahead and look at our pink roll, I believe that's correct. He's going to go ahead. He's the one who read the wheel at the start of the encounter, like I mentioned. He's going to go to his subjugator, and then he's going to come and place in A. But notice he does not dupe in A. And that's because duping takes time. Getting yourself to 1 HP and then placing and then killing yourself in order to dupe takes longer than just placing inside. So instead of duping on A, they choose to dupe on C instead. And so let's go ahead and watch the other POV here. The other POV here, this guy is the one that is not the pink Titan. This is the blue roll Titan here. He's going to dupe on the other side instead. So he's getting himself to 1 HP. You'll see he places, he one-shots himself at the very end there, and you'll see the lens manages to make its way into the socket, but when he reses, the hunter is able to take the lens off of him. Okay, so that is an important consideration there. You don't dupe on the laser that is currently in progress that you want to actually fill up. So for example, when I say in progress, right, first round, there's only one laser that could be in progress, right? But you don't want to dupe for the first one, right, while it's currently being activated. And the reason for that is because, you know, the longer you spend delaying a laser animation, the animations in first encounter are famously long, like the amount of time it takes for a laser to activate a wheel, and then for the wheel to come to life, and then for it to start scanning, and you know, for you to be able to shoot the next laser, turn it on with the crystals. It's a long time, right? So the faster you can kind of get rid of these time gates where you're sitting around waiting, the better. And so if you want to dupe on one that's maybe going to come in the future that you're going to have to wait to activate anyway for some time. Okay, so that's kind of what's going on. And then as for the right side Titan's roll, I mean, I think you can kind of guess what's going on, but they go to right, they kill the subjugator, they dupe here, they get rezzed by the hunter, who then becomes the floater, and then they come back down here to bottom right and they kill the subjugator. Okay, now the rest of the encounter is a little bit more straightforward. The setup here is a little bit different for the first round. The second and third round, the way that it works is fairly simple. So let me go ahead and hide these 3 rolls here and we'll talk about it. Okay, so the hunter actually no longer kills subjugators after the first round. And you might think that's kind of weird, right? Because they're the third player. Why not help? And that's because, well, the Titans are the fastest when it comes to one-shotting the subjugators. They're on Peregrine Greaves, so they can take care of it themselves. And it's better for the hunter to be like a sort of controller or floater role. And what that means is basically every time a Titan dupes in the middle, whether it's on A or on B or on C, when a Titan dupes, the hunter takes that lens and then basically handles this region of the encounter. Right? And so let's say it's top left and A is empty. The hunter will then use their duped lens and place it in A. Maybe, you know, R2 is empty. Then maybe the hunter would place it in C. C is empty and then doesn't have a lens in it. Right? So the hunter is there to fill any kind of gaps in the puzzle that need to be completed in this center area. And it's faster for them to do that because the Titans, they can kind of float between these side rooms. And not only can they float between these side rooms and, you know, just repeatedly spawn kill subjugators over and over and over and fill these whenever they're needed based on the RNG of the call, but they can also read through these little windows here on the side so that they know what both of these rooms are without having to have a second player present on their sides. So the encounter kind of becomes symmetrical after the first round. You have one Titan on the right side here who is sitting at this window and repeatedly spawn killing these subjugators. As soon as he knows the call, he's going to go ahead and dunk in either 3 or 4, and then he's going to kill another subjugator, maybe come to mid and provide a lens here for duping purposes. The Titan that generally has more downtime is going to come to mid and dupe wherever needed, whereas the Titan that has less downtime is going to focus on maybe dunking in the in rooms that are required. Maybe if you had something like L1, L2, this guy would be really preoccupied with dunking here, whereas the Titan on the right would have some extra time, so they would come mid and they would dupe. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Let me go ahead and read my list of things to talk about here. Yeah, so again, this team prioritizes matching the truth call over pre-placing in a bunch of different sockets, just reacting to the call and focusing on the actual time gate of the encounter, which is in this case, waiting for that long laser animation of activating the wheel. So basically, what's going on here is this team, they'll look at the call. So let's say it's like L1, R2, and immediately they'll drop what they're doing and say, okay, if it's L1, we need A and 1 to be interacted with as quickly as possible. Don't even worry about the other stuff for now. Don't worry about pre-placing any of this stuff for now. Focus on this, right? Because as soon as you finish this, it's going to turn on this wheel and then you have some time. You have some downtime to work on the other stuff, right? So it's kind of not just mindless pre-placing, it's really reacting and focusing on that call. Okay. Ordering placements by call order. Yeah, we kind of talked about that already. Duping, we talked about. Prioritizing A and C over B in terms of coverage when it comes to duping, because they have greater access to the entire encounter. Double reading through windows. I'll show you that in a second here. Floater system. Yeah, I talked about that already. Titan downtime fill. We talked about that already. Okay, excellent. So let me go ahead and show you actually what that double reading looks like through the window. And yeah, we'll make our way out of this encounter, hopefully. So let me go ahead and resync the POVs here. And I'm going to skip forward a little bit. Okay. I think the guy in the top left is doing it right now. So he kills the truth speaker, which is a little bit helpful, I guess, but you can see here that he reads and then boom, he reads here as well. So you can read 2 different rooms, and that way you can establish the call out at the start of the round very quickly. So basically the sequence of strategy works like this. If you're the right side Titan, you're going to go into top right, you're going to kill your subjugator, you're going to wait for the call. If the call is top right, you would dunk in your room and then you would come mid and maybe help out, or you would float down to bottom right, you would kill that subjugator and then maybe use that to early dunk in 4, early dunk in D, depending on the status of what's going on in the encounter. If it's not you, you're going to use your lens to help out in this triangle of A, B, C. Specifically, you are probably going to be helping with A or C, depending on the status of the encounter. And if it's not your side, then you're going to probably end up duping. The hunter generally never dupes. It's generally going to be a Titan, right? And then in between rounds, you're going to kill a subjugator, try to get a lens on hand, and then also try to read through the window. As soon as the round ends and the pyramid accepts the truth and the wheels refresh, you want to be on that call right away so that this guy, the L2 guy who's reading the center wheel, he has time to instantly hear all of his teammates' calls and figure out what actually needs to be done in order. Oh yeah, another thing that I forgot to mention, this wheel is picky, right? So if it's like a phrase, for example, let's say it's round number 3 and you have 3 darks and you have 4 symbols, and let's say it's like, I don't know, praise, traveler, guardian, S, you have to do it in order. You have to turn on the lasers in order. You got to go to room guardian, you got to go to room praise, and then you got to go to room traveler. So because there is a specific laser order, this encounter becomes notably harder. If you could just do the lasers in any order, it would be maybe a little bit easier. But because you need to do them in a specific order, people really need to be paying attention and be on the ball in terms of getting those lenses into place as quickly as possible. So let's actually go over the specific RNG so we can actually see what it's like to apply all of these rules in real time. So the very first round, what do these players actually get? Let's go ahead and take a look. So they get L1. So like I said, I actually went through these POVs and I drew exactly what these players are doing, and you'll see that it follows the rules that we're talking about to a T. So the hunter starts by, turning the central lens. They go to the subjugator, they Izzy him, they finisher him, and then they go and place in 1. And that's because the Titan who went to L2 reads the wheel at the start of the encounter, reads the wheel at the start of the encounter, realizes that it is in fact bottom left, that is the 3rd missing callout, and so relays that information to the hunter. In the meantime, this Titan is killing the subjugator in top left. He knows he doesn't need to place in top left just yet, and there's no point in placing it right now. So he comes to A, and instead of duping on A, he places normally in A because A is required for the laser right now, so he doesn't want to delay it at all. This is the first light source, the first socket that touches the light source. So it's really important that this lens is in as early as possible. Now the hunter, in the meantime, he's making his way over to C to revive the Titan here who has created a lens dupe in C. And this Titan, of course, the blue Titan, like we said, they go to top right, they kill the subjugator, they come back, they dupe inside of C. Let me actually erase these path here. This is from the 3rd round, not to make things confusing. They dupe inside of C, they die, they come out, and then they are going to kill the R1 subjugator because he's already spawned in, so he can get ready in R1 to read both R1 and R2 and get ready for the next callout. Okay, so that's the first round. The next round, what goes on? Let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so the next one is the RNG is L1, R2. So after this Titan is done with A, they are going to make their way, I believe, let's actually go ahead and see where they made their way from. Yeah, so they, again, just like the Titan from top right, they make their way to bottom left to then re-kill this subjugator over here. They're going to make their way to the wheel, and both of these Titans are sitting in position to read L1, L2 and R1, R2. And based on those callouts, they're going to figure out what is actually missing from the center wheel here. And this Titan, after reading, he realizes it's L1 and then R2. So then after he kills the subjugator, he has this lens from the previous round. He's going to go ahead and dunk inside of 1 because 1 was used on the previous round. So this is going to be empty. And then he's going to make his way to this subjugator over here because he knows the hunter in middle actually already has a lens, which can be replaced in A. Right? So this is why this is kind of useful to have the hunter as a floater role, because these lenses in the center, A, B, and C, are the first thing that touches the light sources. So it's really important to have someone with a lens here already duped from the previous round so that you can instantly start directing the light to the correct location for the first callout, which is in this case L1. Okay, so the hunter has the duped lens that he picked up from C earlier. He's going to go ahead and place it in A. And then after the left titan kills the subjugator, because the right side titan is focused on doing R2 mechanics, which require him to stay on right side, that leaves the left side titan some time while R2 is being finished to help with duping and get ready for the next set of lenses that need to happen. So he's going to go ahead and bring his subjugator's lens to B over here because A and C are actually currently being used. One is being used by the right side titan, and of course one is being used in order to complete L1. So the R2 titan, or the right side titan here, and this is a confusing mess of arrows, but he started here, right? So he's going to go ahead and read R1, R2 at the start of the round. He realizes that it's R2, so he goes and he brings his lens into 3. He kills the subjugator, and then he's going to bring that lens, after rotating this socket over here, into R1, and he's going to go ahead and place it here in advance, expecting the next round to potentially contain an R1. So, the titan on the right side will often have some downtime in order to fill up 4 and potentially D here. So that's what he is actually doing. Okay. And in this run, thankfully, they actually never get an R1, so this D doesn't need to be filled up, which is kind of nice. We're going to move on to the next round, knowing what we know. So yeah, coming out of every round, we want to have the orange hunter have a duped lens in their hand, and ideally maybe have 1 or 2 of these in rooms already filled up from the downtime. But as you can see, this encounter goes really, really quickly when your players know what they're doing and they're using their lenses efficiently. So really the only lens that's in place right now is going to be lens for the 4 socket. Everything else here is really just people holding onto lenses from the previous round. The orange hunter is holding onto a dupe lens, and the left and right titan have some leftover lenses, probably from killing some subjugators. So next up, we're going to move to our third round. Okay, so the third round is, again, you're reading R1, R2, L1, L2. In fact, you can't even read the center wheel on this round, but that's fine because there is generally only one possible combination from the 4 symbols that you have. You're going to go to 3 out of the 4 rooms. So in this particular case, it's going to be R2, L1, and L2. So this titan here, after reading R1 and R2, he's going to go ahead and bring his lens, and he's going to place it into socket number 3, his lens that he had from the previous round. And then he's going to run his way to the center here, and he's going to focus on directing these lenses for his teammate. Okay, so he's basically, again, he's going to the left one, he's shooting it, he's going to go ahead and he's going to res his teammate who dupes on A. He's going to turn the central lens as well to make sure, the central light source as well, to make sure it's directed in the right location, and then he's pretty much done with his job for the encounter. Okay, the left side titan has a bit more of a complicated job. So as the round ends, he finishes duping on B, he gets rezzed, the orange hunter picks up his duped lens, and then he's going to make his way down to bottom left to his typical read spot. So he's going to kill a subjugator, he's going to read, and he's going to discover that it's R2, L1, L2. He knows R2 is being handled by his teammate, and as we've discussed before, the ABC requirement for the first call out here, so in this case R2, is always going to be covered by the orange hunter. And so the hunter here, we know B has already been filled up from the previous round's dupe. The previous round used A and C, and then B was duped by the pink titan who we just came from as the round ended. So we only need to fill up A and C. And so the orange hunter realizes R2 is going to be covered by C. And so the orange hunter places in C, turns the central light source in order to get it pointed in the right direction, aka towards B, and then leaves on skip, which we'll show in just a second here. And so the pink titan is really just going to be focused on L1 and L2. The pink titan realizes L1 requires 1 and then requires A. So what does he do? He goes, he kills the subjugator, he places in 1, and then he goes, he kills the top left subjugator, and then he dupes in A. And the reason why he dupes is because his teammate's going to come res him here, and then as L1 is finishing and that laser animation is happening, he can pick up the duped lens and then place it in 2 for L2. And then the encounter is over. So obviously this RNG is quite favorable. There's no R1 here whatsoever to speak of, but obviously you can see how these players would probably be able to adapt if an R1 was required. But again, this is a pretty good first encounter. There was generally, if you watch the POVs, not a lot of downtime for a player to maybe place inside of D here. So it probably would have been longer if there was an R1 involved. And again, like we talked about, the reason why R1 is longer is because you need 3 lenses minimum, whereas every single other pathway only requires 2 lenses. Not sure why Bungie designed the encounter this way, given that it looks pretty symmetrical if you look at the optimal pathings, right? It's just, kind of like 2, this could have been 2, 2, and then, this could have been 2, 2, right? Pretty nice, pretty simple, but it is what it is. Makes the dungeon a bit more annoying to run, but that is how the cookie crumbles. Okay, so yeah, let's go ahead and I'm gonna skip through what's going on here. If you're curious, again, I will link this run in the description so you can watch it yourself. But again, it's very, very disorienting, I would say, to watch this run one POV at a time, because it's very confusing in terms of like who is doing what and why are they doing what. They just appear to be running to rooms and placing inside of sockets without any sort of, I don't know, clear direction, I suppose, right? It's very coordinated, but it's hard to kind of see why people are doing certain things and why they're duping in certain locations. They seem to just know exactly what to do and why, right? So hopefully that kind of bird's eye view of showing you guys the Photoshop map will help a little bit more. But you can see the tech that I'm talking about. They're duping in B, that pink Titan that I just talked about. He's duping in B. He was top right on the screen just now. And they're entering third round here. Again, they're reading, start of third round. They're reading through windows, as you can see. And based on the reading, they're figuring out what to do. So again, the right side Titan, who is coincidentally top left here, he's filling up R2 like we talked about. He's going to rotate it. He's going to place. He's going to rotate it once more so that it's facing the correct way. And boom, R2 is done. As you can see, that laser is finished. And the left side Titan is filling up L1. So he's running. And yep, he's duping right over here inside of A. 1, 2, 3, dupe. And then boom, L1's finished. His teammate's going to res him, and he's going to make his way over to L2. And this should be the very last dupe that happens. And the encounter is over. Okay, let's talk about the skip. I'm going to go ahead and close grid player here because we shouldn't really need to see all 3 POVs at the same time from now on. So let's go ahead and go to the actual POVs themselves. So real quick, let's talk about the skip. So the skip, I believe, is going to be Pingo. That's correct. So yeah, Pingo, after he's done doing his job of directing the flow of the central light sources, and he's done helping out with the lenses that he needs to be involved in as the floater, he's going to go ahead and he's going to leave on skip. Now if you want to learn how to do this skip, there are some POVs in Speedrun panel, and I'm sure you can ask people some questions there if you are having some issues with the skip. But basically what it involves is there is a pushdown barrier at the top of the encounter, the ceiling of the encounter, and there is a way to get through pushbacks. It is, through a variety of means, but the one that's used here is a super animation. And Silence and Squall basically holds your character in position, ignoring pushbacks for a brief period of time. And so if you're able to thrust yourself through a pushback using something like a rocket grapple or a shatter skate or what have you, you can use Silence and Squall to get through a pushback. And so this pushback's pretty thin. He's going to go ahead and he's going to Silence and Squall. He's made his way out of the pushback, and now he's made his way out of mounds, right? So he has enough time from the end of first encounter in order to do this. He just needs to make it to the wizards area in the transition, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with. He's going to go ahead and die as soon as he hits this load zone. And as you guys have probably heard of before, when you die after you hit a new load zone, if you don't touch the ground and set your spawn, by respawning, you will spawn in the default spawn of that load zone. We've talked about this plenty of times in other run breakdowns, but this is just another example. So again, he's going to respawn here, and he is going to DSM himself. We've talked about DSM plenty before as well. He's blocking off the default spawns of the load using stasis crystals. Because the game no longer recognizes a valid default spawning position, it's going to spawn him in the fallback, which is what I like to call the Ballway. There's Thrallway in Shattered Throne. You got Ballway in Sundered Doctrine. So this is the official name now. He's going to respawn in the Ballway. He is going to make his way over. So first encounter has just ended. He is going to make his way to the wizards. There's a little bit of RNG with these wizards, obviously, right? Having a 2-2 combination where you only need to turn each wheel twice is going to be obviously a little bit more optimal than having to kill 3 wizards for each of the wheels. He's going to use Ariana's Vow to one-shot the wizard because of the ignition caused by the shield pop, because of Ariana's Vow's new intrinsic. You can see here he's getting his wheels ready. Again, basically just spawn camping the wizards over and over. And while this is happening, you can see his teammates are doing some things behind him. We'll go over what his teammates are doing in a second here, but I'm just going to skip through this section here because I think it's pretty obvious what he's doing. He's just finishing the puzzle as things are. This puzzle is required, and as soon as he finishes the puzzle, he's going to shatter skate into this area. He's going to sword forward into the encounter in order to start it, and he's going to change character. Okay, and by doing this, he's going to pull his team forward. They're going to get joining allies, and he's going to rejoin on a warlock, right? So he's going to disappear, encounter will pull them, and they can start the mechanics, but he's going to switch to a warlock. Okay, as for his teammates, what are they doing? Let's go ahead and look at Mr. Baguette's POV. So again, like I talked about, there's that Aeon finisher in the top left room that, in the bottom left room, I should say, that was made by the Hunter. And Mr. Baguette and Mr. German, they are going to make their ways into the center of the encounter here. They are going to head underneath Flooded Inspection, and they are going to make their way to the next load zone in order to do the same thing that the Hunter did actually. And the reason for this is because there is a checkpoint that needs to be hit after first encounter is over. So the Hunter could hit it, but it would be time loss, right? So the Hunter is instead focused on wizards. So Baguette here, he is going to die as soon as he hits the new load zone so he doesn't set a spawn by accident. Altered Convolution, there you go, that's the name of the new load zone. His friend German is going to block off his spawn with stasis crystals. And then because it's a 45-second respawn, German is actually going to force res him into the crystals, which makes him hit the Ballway checkpoint. Remember how when the Hunter was there were no balls falling down? Well, you actually need to hit this checkpoint in order to progress the dungeon, and it's not retroactive, so the Hunter can't hit it, and then the game will automatically re-hit it when it needs to look for it. So that's why the Titan gets DSM'd here, in order for the Titan to hit the Ballway checkpoint. And you can see that the Titan's just waiting. Eventually, he will get joining allies, which we'll see in just a second here. He's activating a ritual on his tome here in order to get the artifact boost. Sitting here. There you go. There's the objective update. His Hunter is about to pull him. Boom, joining allies. Okay, so that is pretty much everything from entrance to first encounter. Second encounter and third encounter are way easier than first encounter. So hopefully if you guys are falling asleep by now, they will be a lot more enjoyable to explain and to understand. Okay, so the Titans, what are they doing? Let's start with them. The Titans, what are they doing? All they're doing is they just need to rush, kill the wizards, and dunk enough, resonance on 3 in order to get it to spin to kill. That's basically it. Okay, so these guys are just shooting the crystal, making sure it's turning in the right direction. Making some orbs, getting some armor charge for utility kickstart, which they're going to use to get more Storm's Keep barricades, for more bolt charge, for damage. So yeah, you can see they're kind of just chilling. This encounter, I've asked them, is there any way to like speed up the ad spawns, speed up the wizards? They're just like, nah, we're just chilling. We just got to make sure we spawn in the resonance and we dunk it in time to get our kill. So here he is going to dunk, I believe 2. His teammate's going to dunk 1. And, oh, interesting melee tracking. Okay, and as soon as damage starts, look at that. So, yeah, being able to place your resonance into kill, being able to place your resonance into the third wheel makes damage start very, very fast. He's going to T-crash using Curus, so is his teammate. And now he is going to swap to another loadout for damage. And he's on utility kickstart here as well as hazardous propulsion. He is spamming void trace into the Shrieker's crit in order to trigger some artifact mods in order to get this void weaken effect, as well as some volatile. Might be a bit weird to see damage being done on non-heavy weapons, but most of their damage here is going to be the T-crashes, which you saw were a huge chunk of damage at the start. Now he's just weakening a Shrieker here. His teammate's weakening a separate Shrieker using the Void Crit artifact mod, and his teammate's Wither Hoarding a separate Shrieker as well in order to get some Bolt Charge, which you can see is chunking the boss a fair amount. And there's also a Chaos Rage from Pingo as well, and the encounter is over. So this is really nice. I mean, this kill is obviously not insanely fast. I mean, it's probably fast for maybe LFG standards, but these guys have talked about experimenting with potentially a faster kill. But them having this much heavy ammo is really, really good going into the next encounter, and you'll see why in just a second. That's a wink, wink. They're going to be switching heavy weapons. Obviously, they want a lot of ammo conversion. As you can see here, Trace Rifle is really, really good at shooting these balls, and if you hit them with enough speed, they go over the side of this little ramp thing. A little cool trick for you guys. You can place them in the hole pretty quickly. Another thing here, he dies here because I believe he told me that his character often was desynced, so his teammates could not res him, or he could not res his teammates. One of those two going into this next transition section probably has to do with the sheer amount of entities they were creating and bolt charge and all this crazy stuff they were doing to the boss with how fast it was dying. So apparently he was desynced from his teammates, so he just died to reset his character's status or something like that. And yeah, and they're making their way to the next encounter. One more thing before we briefly move on here. Pingo, our friend Pingo over here, he's going to rejoin on Warlock. Oh, I skipped at the perfect timestamp. And as you would expect, he is just farming, you know, a Chaos Reach, using Geomags and Tempest Cascade on Delicate Tomb. So as you can see, boom, gets his super. Damage is about to start, about to hit the halfway mark. Little Ionic Sentry there. Floating, floating, floating. And boom. Right? Wait, yo, comment section. Can you have 4 Shriekers instead of 3? This looks like maybe he's hitting 4. Might be 3 though. Yeah, maybe it was 3. But there you go. And then appears like he's trying to do some merciless damage as well. In the meantime, just pump it out. Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. But as you can see, this damage strategy of not needing to use any of your sword ammo, not needing to use heavy ammo, means that these guys can switch to Salvation's Grip. They're going to make their way to the 2-3 transition. Now I'm going to briefly pause here. Well, I'm not going to pause, but I'm going to briefly here discuss. There is a new 2-3 skip strategy that is being experimented with, which is kind of interesting. So maybe look out for that. Unfortunately, the area in the second encounter load zone is filled with turn back as soon as you start the encounter. So it's rather difficult to formulate a skip that will actually work in a full run. But some teams are experimenting with it, and if that ever gets found, you'll probably see it posted in the Speedrun panel server. But for now, these are the most recent strategies. Another thing I do want to point out here is we're going to go back to the Baguette POV here, and that's because they have some pretty cool crystal placement, right? And so the crystal placement here, I want to point it out because it's kind of a bit clever, because previously, right, you would need to have the person who you wanted to res, or you would need to have the reviver, so the person who is resing the person in the crystals, they would need to be standing on top of the glacier nades, or like in the glacier nades while they were being thrown, because obviously you can't walk into glacier nades once the glacier's already there, right? So this crystal placement is a little nice because now Baguette doesn't really need to rush his way over here, because the crystal can be thrown whenever and he can just crouch under it. And because this crystal is clipping into where a player's head would be, the game refuses to spawn a player here. And so he can res German, or sorry, he can res Pingo. You'll see German gets auto-res for some reason, where Pingo is getting sent, right? So the fallback spawn for this DSM here is actually an auto-res checkpoint. So when Pingo gets resed, he triggers an auto-res, which then revives German in place. But since he can't be resed, German also gets sent forward. Okay, now another big change that this team made compared to the previous record, which was like a high 9 or a mid 9, I believe, is that they don't wipe pull. Right? They don't wipe pull. Wipe pulling in dungeons is generally seen as a favorable strategy a lot of the time because wipe screens in dungeons are only 7 seconds. In raids, they're 17 seconds, so we try to avoid wipe pulling in raid speedruns. But because they're 7 seconds in dungeons, a lot of people prefer them because they make things convenient. You can just place the flag and you don't need to worry about any teammates lagging behind. Everyone gets pulled, right? But wipe pulling is technically a bit slow, right? You have the 5-6 seconds of the lock, you have the 7 seconds of the actual wipe screen. That's like 12 seconds of time loss. So what these guys do instead is Baguette, waiting. Pingo and German, they're actually going to make their way forward. Let me actually go ahead and show you that. I want to leave you in the dark here. Let's get forward. They get res. You'll see they make their way pretty much into the transition. Much more forward into the transition here. They're going to sword forward, and they are just going to complete the rest of the transition by themselves without their friend Baguette. So, just like that. Boom. You can see they skip the little puzzle with the lenses entirely. They can place the flag here. Baguette is going to be dead. He's going to res, and he's going to death warp. We've talked about death warping before. That's when you die in the same load zone as an encounter that's starting. The encounter then pulls your ghost into the starting location of that encounter. Obviously, Baguette doesn't get a flag here, but it's not a big deal because we'll see that he is using he has a lot of heavy ammo, again, because he didn't use any heavy on Zoetic. So that makes his life a lot easier here. And they have a standard 1-1-1 setup here, right? You got the middle guy, the warlock. He's going to take care of the underneath symbols as well as the above ground symbols in the center chamber. He's going to call out the symbols for his teammates. Baguette's going to the right and German's going to the left, right? Let's go ahead and look at Baguette's POV one more time here. And yeah, there's a little bit of RNG in the final encounter. So yeah, again, you can see he's dying, waiting for his teammates. As soon as they hit the final boss encounter objective, he is going to die just like that. Boom. He's going to switch to Lumina. Spoiler alert. What's he using Lumina for? We'll see. teammates res him. He unfortunately does not get the flag, but he doesn't need it. Okay. So this damage strategy that's upcoming is a little scrappy, right? It's a little custom made. It's you're gonna be a little bit surprised to see a well, not to spoil anything here, but he's gonna put on a machine gun for damage, right? Which is a lot of people were asking why he did this. So you know, I was also curious. I asked him why he put on a machine gun, and the reason is he gets no super. And he does not have the ability to rally on a separate heavy weapon. So if he were to be on something like Queenbreaker, he wouldn't have a ton of ammo. He'd have like half his ammo. That's number one. And he also has no access to a super, right? So he wants to be able to build his super so that at the end they can T-crash the boss. I was talking to him and he was saying that like maybe he could have, you know, picked like a slightly more optimal machine gun, but they were killing the boss pretty consistently with the strategy compared to using Queenbreaker, right? So yeah, he's on honing. He's just dumping his machine gun, and as you guys know, machine guns give you a lot of super energy. And he's also on a Withering Gaze energy hand cannon, and that's because particle deconstruction was interfering with the, I think it's a volatile marksman or like maligned harvest, the weaken on crit effect from the machine gun. And so he was just guaranteeing that his teammates would have a weaken for their T-crash. As you can see here, he's just ADSing, getting that Withering Gaze, and boom, him and his teammates cures T-crash the boss. And the boss is dead. Okay, his two teammates are using Queenbreaker. The warlock's probably like sanguine swapping. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Small tip, I believe you don't want to unravel this boss because he kind of jerks around a lot and becomes a lot more annoying to consistently crit with Queenbreaker. But yeah, two teammates on Queenbreaker. He's on Lumina. He's jumping and, you know, shooting Lumina because Lumina's tracking can be very bogus sometimes and really just track to the same teammate multiple times despite the fact that you shoot in the opposite direction. So that's why he's kind of jumping weirdly like that. But yeah, he's just buffing his teammates who do get the chance to rally, whereas he does not get the chance to rally. So yeah, he's on Lumina and a machine gun. Pretty interesting stuff there. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, yeah, there's some RNG components in the final encounter, but nowhere near as bad as first encounter. I mean, in theory, first encounter, yeah, you have a pretty high chance of running it back because almost any R1 is bad. Some R1s can be runnable in second round, but no R1s are preferable, and that is what they got in this run. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have any questions about Sundered Doctrine, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'm sure this team and other teams that are interested parties in this potential tournament here are going to be answering them. And excited to engage with new runners. And again, if you have like any more specific questions or you want to see the latest strategies that are being posted about this dungeon, feel free to join the Speedrun panel server as well. That's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I probably won't see you for a bit until my finals are over, maybe like mid-April. But yeah, I'll see you then.